Hello. Hi, hello, Mind Body Energy Project and Yolanda. Can we cut that out? I am just I just have so many things on my plate right now that I don't even know how to operate anymore right now. This is why I don't open the show.
Tiffany, hi. My name is Yolanda. Nice to meet you. For everyone else, welcome to the Mind Body Energy Project.
Oh God. Keeps are cool. Zero.
Honey, how are you doing today, Tiffany?
Oh, fantastic. Can't you tell?
Yes. Well, in all fairness, Tiffany is preparing to go officiate yet another wedding.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
And I'm juggling a million things that I need to get done before I leave.
and you still made time to come and show up for the Mind Body Energy Project. So, listen,
Because, yeah,
if you're a
the
little
mind body
scattered,
energy. Yeah, the Mind Body Energy Project is priority.
it is. I love it. But let me tell you, I appreciate it that you figured out how to make it work so
Got
that
to.
we didn't all have to miss you for a week.
Thank you. Thank
Hmm?
you.
So, our last conversation that we had was all about identity crisis. And
Hmm.
then for our MBE insiders, we provided some bonus content about going deeper into that. So, hopefully, you guys had an opportunity to look at that as well.
Hmm.
And today we thought we would talk about sexual energy.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've sprinkled it in. A few things, a few other topics had brought this topic up, and we had notated that we need to save it for a later time, so it could be a full podcast. And here it is.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things in this arena that we would like to talk
Yeah,
about today.
getting
And
provocative.
yeah, I mean, like one of the things, I mean, because we all have sexual energy, I mean, whether
Hmm.
it's suppressed or like um, hyperactive or, you know, somewhere in between, we all have sexual energy. And it's very powerful energy, you know, it's
Hmm.
creative energy. So we thought it'd be cool to have this conversation, not just in the context of sex itself, but the energy of it all. So
Yeah.
since you do so much work with chakras, I wonder if you could like start off with just sharing some information about like the chakras that are related to or most notably connected to our sexual energy.
Well, I think obviously the second chakra, the sacral chakra, which is the color orange, is most closely related to sexual energy because it's where sexual reproductive organs are. It's the chakra of creativity and passion and emotions. So we physically create something, children, with that chakra, and then also like creating something to put out into the world. And we've talked about the yin energy inside where it begins, and then the yang energy of actually like getting this thing out into the world, whatever it may be. And that's all related to the sacral chakra.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing to point out from the beginning because there are some people, even for like religious reasons or whatever, why some people think that our sexual organs and our reproductive systems and our sexual energy is only for the purposes of reproducing other humans. But the truth is that we are creators, period. And
Mm-hmm.
so our creative energy can be channeled and is channeled important to everything that you create. So it's not just about reproducing, but literally what you're creating out in the world, like how you are harnessing that creative energy, which we can also, for this conversation, talk about our sexual energy, how we harness that and then pour it into or direct it into our creations or what we give birth to.
Well, and also as you were saying that, I was thinking about sexual energy. We're both masculine and female energy, right? And we're
Yes.
always finding that balance and creating. You need male and feminine to create.
Mm-hmm.
And sexual is really just sex, male and
Mm-hmm.
female. So it's not necessarily like wanting
Or,
to go and hump
or
everything.
or same sex, but this is the
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
I think.
Whatever.
Yeah, but this is the thing too, like exactly what you said. It's like that idea that creation or is only procreation, but we
Yeah.
are literally made of or comprised of both feminine and masculine energy within
Yes.
our own beingness. So of course
Right.
we have the ability to create on our own, maybe not, another human on our own, although, science and these things, like who knows what, you might be able to
Yeah.
think of a baby right there.
Yeah.
But but like literally we are designed to create, and we are a blend of these opposing energies, and when we
Right.
harmonize them we do amazing things. It kind of reminds me of too, when we think of, well, let's go and I want to ask you about this, like, we could be provocative a little bit, but like sexual energy, right? So when people are sexually stimulated or aroused, and you think of the intensity of that energy,
Hmm.
think back
Hmm.
to some experiences that you may have had. Like that is intense. It can be intense energy. And especially think of the charge when there is this like attraction between you and another person, and how that energy may like build in. Like, do you ever think about the power of that energy? I mean, just from what you're
Yeah.
feeling and experiencing, like that's some intense energy.
Yeah. And I think, so not speaking just of sexual energy, but all of our energy, everything is energy, right? We are energy. We have different types of energy. And one of the things that I think of that has really interested me when I've gone down this thought theory path is that sexual energy, as we know it on the surface for humans, how we label it, since we were just talking about labeling things, um, it can get a bad rap and it can be also misused.
Mm-hmm.
Again, misuse is probably a subjective terminology, like on a spectrum. But I feel that sexual energy can be misused because if your energy in any other part, if you're not communicating properly, you're not connecting to spirit properly, anything, if any of these energies are off, it needs to move. Energy needs to move. It needs to be free flowing. It needs to be balanced. And if it's not, it's going to be repressed somewhere, and it's going to come out pressurized in another avenue. And I feel from my personal observations is that sexual energy, as we express it as humans, is probably the easiest outlet, because it is such an intense energy that if these other energies are pushing, somewhere else, sexual energy is one of the easiest ways to expel that suppressed energy. And then in turn becomes what we could call quote unquote misused somehow.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that's the whole thing, I think, where things get convoluted because we haven't been taught about our energy and really
Right.
understanding the dynamics of our design. And so there are a lot of, what could be categorized as spiritual practices where people learn how to harness their sexual energy, but not to expel it out in the way that we do in like sexual exchange, or I mean, you could have fun all by yourself, whatever you're doing. But instead of allowing that release to happen, there's this practice of building that energy and harnessing that energy and just sitting with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine again, like if your body, if your system, your entire beingness is like this generator of energy, right? And you have the ability or know how to generate one of your most potent energy centers in terms of creation. If you didn't necessarily just let it out haphazardly, but had some intentionality around that release. So it could be that you are in connection with another person, and perhaps you guys are doing like tantric practices or just some very intentional connective work together, right? That experience, even in the release and intentionality, could be a very magical thing. Like it might be mind-blowing, right? But even if it were something that was just done for yourself, instead of just releasing that energy without purpose, you could literally learn how to harness and then channel that energy in other ways
Mm-hmm.
of creation and like of creating in other ways, you know, like maybe an artist, if they,
Yeah.
you know, took themselves to the edge and like really
Right.
harness that and let that energy like come out in the form of their work.
Which is why I think it's so important, like, one, an education on that we're energetic beings, and two, yeah, if you were to harness that, but we're so quick to just be like, okay, I have to get it out this way, you know, and this is the only way I know how to do it, rather than understanding discipline and balance of energies.
Yeah. Well, that's the key word you said too. It's like sometimes I feel like we're in like the same stream of consciousness together.
Yeah.
But the balancing is exactly what I was thinking about, because if our sexual energy is misaligned, like say it is like hyper masculine with that surge of like output or whatever, like, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be healthy for us, depending on, you know, how that was directed and used. And you know, if it was hyper to the feminine side, it isn't necessarily the most potent way to use it as well. But it's that harmonization of both the feminine and the masculine in that circulation and harnessing of energy. So while like, I guess what I'm saying, it sounds like really easy, like, oh, just sit there and get yourself excited and then like, ooh, there's some magical energy. But no, it's more, how do you harmonize the feminine and masculine within your being, and then harness and amplify and generate that, which would take a lot more practice. But I think the bigger point of it is that we have this sexual energy that we've only engaged with in maybe a more animalistic
Rudimentary.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there could be, well, there is really other layers to it that we just
Yeah.
haven't,
Well,
most of us haven't tapped into.
I think because that first layer of it is actually such a deep experience,
Mm-hmm.
an intense experience, that people don't think there is anything beyond that, or they're not taking the time and discipline to get beyond that, to see what else there is underneath the surface of that first animalistic layer.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost like it's good enough, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, yeah, it is, if you've had that experience, but what more could be done with it?
Well, it makes me think too of like opposites attract, right? And again, just to be clear for people, this has nothing to do with gender. But if you are
Mm-hmm.
just attracted to another person, it's almost like that attraction is happening because of the opposition or the duality, the dualistic nature between the two of you. And one of you may be amplifying like one aspect more, and the other one is amplifying where you may not, where you may be more deficient, say energetically, right? And there's this want to come together, to draw together, to like create this surge, this power, this connection. But imagine then again, if you had that type of connection with someone and you were able to feel and experience that activation of energy within your field, but not necessarily, again, just releasing haphazardly. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the only way I can think of how to say it today.
Well, more mindfully.
Yes, more mindfully.
Yeah.
And how, I mean, what would it feel like to just sit with it? But I think we'd have to change our mind around it too, because a lot of people think of like, if you don't have that release, then people feel frustration.
Mm-hmm.
But is the frustration just because you didn't get what you think you were supposed to get or what you wanted? Or is there like is there a different, what's really happening? Do you know what I mean? Like, what is that feeling really that we're automatically labeling as frustration? Like, what is percolating within our system when we feel
Right.
excited or turned on, or
Yeah.
maybe?
Well, I also, like I said earlier, you know, if our energy systems are misaligned or unbalanced, that energy is going to look for an outlet somewhere, you know. And I think some of the frustration lies in the fact that, like, you know, and it's the same thing with emotions too. If we repress emotions, they're going to calcify in our system somehow and make us sick. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost it's almost the same thing with sexual energy. If it's like bottled up somewhere, it's just energy that settles in a place and it's not being given the acknowledgments that it's seeking in order to give you, the individual, a message that you need to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, we're talking about like, yeah, when you get these urges that don't make sense, or like, you know, I don't want to say misused, but just it's not in maybe what would be deemed correct alignment of the usage of it. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
sexual energy and its good use with another person is getting closer, creating something, you know, having that bond, whatever it may be. And maybe outside of that is energy that just kind of has gotten lost and it's looking for an outlet somewhere. So the easiest place for it to go is to let me embed myself in sexual energy, because I know that this person knows how to satisfy that. So we can just get this energy expelled.
That's interesting too, because it makes me think of like, do we even consider our relationship to our sexual energy, right? Where some people like to have, like I've heard people say they like to have makeup sex, right? Like they're angry or something, and then that's where they like to connect. But really it's because they like, what is that about? Like you're trying to use sex as a way of dispelling or secreting energy or upset. That's probably another word. You know what I'm saying? God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I'm like walking like a thin line of like
Yeah,
trying
it's
not to
okay.
be inappropriate, do you know? But so like, you know, someone's angry, they're upset, and then they have like this angry sex together. But really what you're trying to release is the upset and the anger, but you've misdirected it into this thing, right? And then you create this pattern or this habit of believing like, oh, this is a nice kind of setup, right? And then even unconsciously, then you may start seeking arguments and disharmony with your partner just because you want to get to the goods.
Right.
So to speak.
And so that's a great example, because the problem with that, and again, this is a misuse of misguided energy, right? Because you're angry and you're upset about something. So you had a fight, something set you off. And you haven't figured out what the underlying problem, you don't know why that strife was created in the relationship, right? But you go immediately to sex and everything is better. Why? Because you release oxytocin, you release all of the, like the serotonin, all of the good hormones that literally make you healthier, feel better, and calm your nervous system have now flooded your system. So yes, you feel better and everything's hunky-dory until it fucking happens again. Because why? Because you haven't solved the baseline issue as to why you were angry or not getting along in the first place.
That reminds me of my friend that used to give her dog a treat when it would bark. And I was like, whoa, that's the wrong message we're sending, okay? Now
you
the
ever
dog
hear of
is going to
Pavlov's
think.
dog? Pavlov had a dog, and Pavlov, he had a dog.
Listen, I was like, you don't want to give your dog a reward for misbehaving like that, you know, but you know, in her mind, it was like, oh, it gets him to shut up. But it's like, yeah, but he's trained you. Do you see? This is just whatever. But but what was I going to say about that? Our relationship to our sexual energy, and even looking at or recognizing too, when we do feel more inspired to feel connected or wanting to connect to other people or wanting to connect with ourselves, it's usually when we're in a state of joy or something, you know what I mean? Or like, it's just paying attention, I guess, paying attention to what makes that kind of ignite in you. And then on the other hand, I mean, we won't go too deep into it because that's a whole nother show, but a lot of us, men and women, like everyone across the board, a lot of people have sexual trauma and have shut down their lower chakras and disconnecting from that sexual energy, from not feeling safe in body, from trauma. I mean, and not just sexual trauma, but a lot of women shut down or disconnect from their sexual or their lower chakras because of birthing trauma. Like there are so many different things. Or it could be, you know, sometimes people have something like an operation or a car accident and they've disconnected from being in body because it doesn't feel safe in this thing. So there are a lot of different things that also take us out of being in harmony with our energetic being and presence, which is also something that we can't work on unless we recognize it in ourselves.
Yeah, that is a whole nother podcast.
I know, but I just wanted to point it out, like not to say
Yeah.
You know, like we think like, oh, everybody should just harness that energy. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
obviously, like a
Right.
lot of us have, you
Yeah.
know, things to work through to
Yes.
get to that. But, you know, it's a really interesting thing when I think our cultural view of sex, and if you said to someone sexual energy versus what it could actually be about.
Hmm.
It's something, isn't it?
It really is. I
But
had a thought and then it went away.
yikes.
I know. What was it? Uh,
Oh, while you're thinking about it,
yeah.
it reminds me of a couple of things I was thinking about when we were talking about this, or we were saying that we are going to talk about this, was that unifying within ourselves, like how important that is, you know, and we're often just concerned with our outward attractions, either feeling attractive or noticing what we are attracted to. But it's really rare that people do work on that, harmonizing the feminine and masculine within themselves. And even without just focusing on, you know, the sexual energy, it's amazing what you'll start to recognize and realize in terms of all of your energy centers coming online and balancing and harmonizing within your being. It's like there's the real creative surgeons, right?
Hmm.
So, you know, the lower chakras, though, it's like it's where we start. And that's an interesting thing when you think of like these lower chakras, the sexual energy, this whole realm down here. I mean, it's like it's our foundation.
Yeah. I've kind of put my ideas of chakras and how to teach them that the lower three are human and the top three are spirit, and they come together at the heart chakra. And the three lower ones are what actually like they're like our feminine and masculine energy of how we actually are a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And then vice versa for the top three. But I just keep coming back to this idea that we all are masculine and feminine energy, and that just this whole idea of sexual energy is just the combination of those two,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of like our lower human chakras and the physical actions of what sexual energy becomes when we utilize it, but just simply the fact that like our entire being is sexual energy because it's a combination of two different sexes
Yeah.
energetically, you know. So to put it in that kind of a perspective, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, and that is, I think, what is most fascinating about us is that we are comprised of these um, opposite energies, right? You know, the feminine and the masculine. But what you're saying too, it reminds me of the step one, like the root chakra, which is below the sacral that you speak about, and the importance of just self connection. Like before we can even like really lift up into that area of our sexual energy and
Mm-hmm.
balancing and harmonizing that, one crucial component is being connected to yourself, like rooting into the body, that root chakra energy, feeling safe in body,
Mm-hmm.
which again can be compromised from, you know, traumatic experiences. So one of the things I think that can benefit all of us in terms of not just thinking again of sexual energy as sexual only, but like more of your creative energy and how you create, start with acknowledging how connected you feel to yourself. Like, do you feel safe in body? What would make you feel more safe in body? What are you even present? Like, are you here and engaged with like
Mm-hmm.
your life and like what is going on? And do you ever even contemplate or pay attention to what it feels like to be in body and the experience of being in body? Because you have to start with being present in here before you can even then like start to
Yeah.
even imagine unifying within yourself or um, directing your energy more consciously.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking about
My voice sounds kind of raspy today.
yeah. Ooh. We're talking about energy being kind of misguided and comes out in different ways, be it inappropriately sexual, be it yelling in anger vocally, like whatever it is, these energies are um, expressing themselves, or we're expressing that energy in an unbalanced way. And coming back to really getting into your body and getting into understanding your energies. And we're always coming back to this self-work, right? Like that's what the Mind Body Energy Project is about, is really understanding your mind, your body, your energy. And if we really do a deep dive into each one of the chakras and start really understanding what our energy is that exists in each one of those, I mean, could you think about that? Like if everybody sat down, if we were taught that in a class and we sat down and like really studied our own energy, and then we became more aware of like how we're functioning within ourselves with each of these different outlets of energy and trying to balance them and being aware of when they're not balanced and being able to retract back into ourselves and do the self-work that it takes to look at it. I mean, we are self-healing mechanisms physically, and then, you know, we have this information system within us to reflect back how to fix ourselves, essentially. Not that we're broken, but, you know, I think sometimes we get to the point where we think we're left to the mercy of this is just the way I am. Fuck that shit. It's not.
There you go, listen to our last podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not just like this. You have all of the tools you need to change that. In settling on complacency of like, this is just who I am and you don't like it, then shame on you. Sorry, that was aggressive. But really the shame is that we have this potentiality and this strength and like the energy to do all of this, and we don't use it. Like, how sad is that?
Well, I mean,
and I'm a victim of it. I do it.
In all fairness, though, I mean, like, no one told us, you know?
Yeah, nobody did tell us, but we're telling you.
Yeah. And for a lot of us,
I'm telling myself.
You know, it's like all brand new, and it is amazing. Like, I think I'm really excited at the idea of what these younger generations will be like, having parents who are practicing these things and like them being raised with these insights and these different ideas and philosophies and principles. And one of the things too, I want to say, like working on your sexual energy and balancing that energy, again, it's about like your inherent nature to be a creator, and it doesn't have anything to do with just reproduction, and it's not just about the act of sex. So when we're talking about this and healing your sexual energy and starting to get familiar with that aspect of your energetic coding, it doesn't mean you have to, you know, go out there and start getting it in and doing, you know, that sexual activity. Like really
I was waiting for you to clarify.
like really thinking about how can you come into a deeper relationship with yourself first and foremost, and how can you become more familiar with and engage with your own internal passions, your own internal your emotion, and like just that creative nature within yourself. And what does it mean to even be feminine and masculine, and what would that mean or feel like to harmonize that for you, you know? And again, you know, then you can work your way up and balance a whole lot of stuff. But it's I think it's such a significant energy to talk about, because we are creating all the time, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously. You're creating all the time. So it would benefit you to start tapping into how you're creating, how you're generating your creative energies, because it effing matters.
And I like how you brought it back to the relationship with the self and the relationship with your own energy, because I mean, how many times have people engaged in sexual activity, human aspects of it, and have been unfulfilled or felt empty after that, you know? And like, I feel like going inside and doing the work with you can help you understand where the fulfillment is. And then that might actually change your outward expression of everything. But it always has to start inside.
Totally. And I think, you know, even doing this work of just getting to know yourself and connecting with yourself and energy work and all of these things, because we drudge up a lot of like information that may have been suppressed in our field, and we're working through so many layers and unexpectedly, even a lot of times, I think that does change sometimes people's sexual expression. A lot of times I think people go through a cycle of like not wanting to engage with any sexual energy. They want to like just leave me alone. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are going through that too, know that that's not odd. I mean, it is a very common thing that when people are doing or going deep into their self-work, there are pockets of it where you really don't want to connect with anyone else that in that way.
Yeah.
And it's common. A lot of people experience that, but
yeah, when you're diving deep, you're going to get raw. And I mean, it's kind of like having an open wound. Hey, easy.
Jesus.
Yolanda.
Okay.
I'm over here keeping it PG.
Are you though?
I'm trying to. It's hard.
Yeah.
You're a dirty mind on the other end.
Let me tell you, I have to say, like, this is, I'm really proud of us. I think,
Yeah.
we've
But what I
managed
meant was, when you dive deep and do the self-work, you do get to a place of like intense vulnerability with yourself. And it's like, if you're walking around with an open wound, like you're not going to leave that out like unbandaged and just go out, because you could get an infection or you could rub up against something and then get it all dirty. And it's kind of like, what are you looking at me like that for? I don't even know what you're thinking right now.
nothing. I'm just listening.
I'm making an analogy.
I know.
Okay. Is it not landing?
No, it's landing. It's landing and sticking all over the place.
Oh my God. Why did I agree to this topic?
No, I mean on multiple layers. Like what you're saying,
yes.
like it speaks to multiple layers. That's all.
So what I was getting at is that if you feel like you are going into hiding and you don't want to connect with anybody or anything while you're doing this work, it makes sense because you're opening up a wound essentially, and you're not going to be walking around without a Band-Aid on that. So it makes sense that you're, if we do close off or retract, it's because we're doing healing.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like layers to that as well, like a lot of forgiveness that comes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of like, we say this all the time, but it's true. Like there's a lot of compassion to be held for ourselves when we're healing any layer of our energetic makeup and our feelings, our emotions, our coding, on and on and on, right? But yeah, I mean, I think the sexual energy and why we want to talk about it is because it is rarely spoken about, like in like mainstream, outside of it just being related to sexual acts or reproduction. And it really is much more than that. So hopefully we've given you something to consider and think about. And for our MBE insiders, if this ends up being one that we do bonus content on, just fair warning, we're not going to bet our tongues with you guys.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Our bonus content is unguaranteed though of which topics that they will be out for. So
but just anyone who has been considering becoming an insider, just so you guys know, like we're much more candid behind the scenes. So
yeah,
just fair warning. We told you.
It's a safe place for you. It's a safe place for us.
Yes, exactly.
So come on in.
Yeah, come take a peek.
Become an insider.
Yeah. So before we go, I just want to ask you really quickly, have you, in this practice of like whatever your spiritual practices are, have you ever intentionally worked with your sexual energy outside of just, or even in sexual connection, like either side, have you had some intentional work with this energy?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I feel like it's always an ongoing evolution of working with it, like each experience is going to lend itself to new. Was that the last podcast we talked? Yeah, it was the last. I'm like, which podcast was this? We just recorded one before this, but yeah, the last one I mentioned something about how each experience is always brand new, because when you encounter somebody or some new circumstance, it's an energy that you've never come in contact with before. So there's always new information coming in. And if you choose to process it, then it evolves you. And so then you're constantly evolving. And I say choose to process it because that requires being mindful of what's actually happening in the whole experience, from what's happening with you and your experience and what you're experiencing now, and like who's ever else is in your presence or whatever the thing is that you're creating something like artistically or whatever it is, whatever those things are, lend itself a whole new experience that you didn't have personally. So now you're taking that in and you're blending it and you're evolving from that.
Yeah.
I will say though, in that it also requires a attention to patterns, because especially with sexual energy, we have a habit of falling into patterns. And then we say like, oh, I always like do the wrong thing or fall into this pattern. And again, I come back to like, we are the ones with the power to change that, but you have to be mindful.
That reminds me of, that was probably one of the big things with me personally in sexual energy and doing this work. I definitely went through a stage where I was like hyper aware of the sacredness of connection, where it was just like, whoa, this is my temple, and I'm not just connecting with anybody, you know what I mean? And it was, it was a lot of this stuff, and it wasn't intentional. Like, it wasn't like I was intending to work on sexual energy, but just by default of working on myself, you do strengthen your connection to you, and you do have a different kind of like reverence for your body, your connection to yourself, and like all of these things. So I remember very distinctly like going through a process or cycle of time where I was like, no, like it felt like a very sacred in a way that I had never experienced as a feeling before doing this work. Whereas before it maybe have been more fun. But it was very like, whoa, like this is a serious exchange here. Like not serious, you know what I mean? But like,
well, yes, yeah.
Like, had like a reverence for like, wow, this is really a powerful type of situation. And do you even recognize, like even like being even more mindful of the people that you're engaging with and their mindset and like how they're showing up in the exchange, because that's just as important. So it's like all of these different layers do start to and I'm glad that interesting.
I'm glad that you said that, like bringing up the word reverence, because it is like, it's the most vulnerable you can get with somebody in the act of sex, right? It's one of the most vulnerable ways that we can physically be in action with somebody, and thereby it opens the gates to so much vulnerability, and if you're taking that for granted, or you're building all of these walls in the midst of that vulnerability, that's just going to lend itself to more work if you don't even realize it, so if you are doing this work and then you notice like, hold on, this is a revered space, that's for a reason, because you're blending your energy with somebody else's, and like some of that, you want to carry the weight of that, some of that karmic energy.
I have to say, I hope that we do the bonus content on this one, because I just remembered a story that I want to tell the insiders about an incubus. Do you remember the incubus story?
Incubus is one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the band. Not at all.
But I'll tell you what, if the lead singer of that band was my incubus, I wouldn't be mad.
So maybe, so when Tiffany returns from Hawaii, maybe that's what we'll do, because this isn't going to post until whenever. I don't even know what day it is.
I don't know.
Where are we? It's like Twilight Zone.
No, today's Wednesday. Is today Wednesday?
Today is Wednesday, doll.
It's Wednesday, yeah. Today's
but
Wednesday.
Our last podcast posted today. Yes.
Yeah.
We're in the future. We're reporting to you live from the future.
21.21 gigawatts. What is it? 12.21 gigawatts.
I don't know. But so this will post on the 24th. So what will happen is I'll try to finagle it with Tiffany, and we will find out a way how we could do bonus content for you guys on this one, because there are some things we could talk about. Sound good, Tiffy?
Sounds good.
Well, honey, I hope that you have an amazing trip to Hawaii.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're going to be a lovely officiant. Again, officiator.
Official, you
Man.
can just call me Reverend.
Oh yes, I forgot. Reverend Tiffy. Honey, brainwaves today.
Reverend Tiffy.
It's like you started out discombobulated and I ended that way. We always come like full circle,
See
right?
what I'm talking about getting in people's energetic space? You got to be
Yes.
careful.
Because you will sync up and be like, what's wrong with me? It's not you, it's her.
That's right. That's right. It's true.
Woo! Man. Well, I'm glad we had this conversation, and
Same.
we would love to hear what your thoughts are, what your thoughts are around sexual energy, and if you work with this energy in any particular way intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, become an insider for some bonus content. Share your thoughts. We love to hear it. Leave a review. We love you.
Goodbye.
Hasta pasta.